Marital commitment is a covenant, not a contract. Everybody say marital commitment is a covenant and not a contract. So we're going to look at Malachi chapter 2. And the book of Malachi mostly is really written to the priests. Now, the context of this is God talking to these priests, and he's talking to them about the affairs and the state of their marriage. Because in biblical days, it was fine for priests to get married. As a matter of fact, remember Eli, he was the priest in the Old Testament that raised Samuel. He had 2 sons. Well, how did he have 2 sons? Because he was married. Remember John the Baptist? His dad was Zechariah. Well, Zechariah was a priest. Elizabeth was his wife. They ended up having a son, John the Baptist. So in biblical days, it was fine for a priest to get married. And that's really how it should be today. No shade on the Catholic Church, but there shouldn't be a requirement for a man to not be married. I believe that's one of the reasons the Catholic Church is having all these issues. Amen. So let's read Malachi chapter 2. I'm reading out of the ESV version. I believe you're going to learn something today. It says, and this second thing you do, this was God talking to the priest again. He says, you cover the Lord's altar with tears. You cover the Lord's altar with weeping and groaning because he's no longer regarding or accepting your offerings with favor from your hand. And so they said to him, well, why don't you accept them, Lord? He says, because the Lord was what? Witness. So I want you to pay attention to that because that's going to help us see that one thing about a marriage is that's one of the things that the Lord is a witness of. He says, because the Lord was witness between you and the wife of your youth to whom you have been faithless. Though she is your companion and though she is your wife, by what, church? By what? By covenant. He said, listen, I have witnessed between you and your wife. And by the way, not only is she your companion, but she is your wife by covenant. Verse 15 says, did he not make them one with the portion of the Spirit in their union? And if you keep reading that, it talks about God's perspective on marriage. But there are 2 things I want you to notice very quickly. The first thing is, it says that the Lord was a witness to them being joined together. He was a witness. But also, number 2 is that marriage itself to God is viewed as a covenant. Everybody say covenant. Now, contracts are normally written between 2 individuals or more. But in the case of marriage, sometimes people view it as a contract. And so contracts are typically between 2 parties, and each party promises to perform certain duties or actions. And see, these duties or actions and this contract is conditional and can be broken because it depends on if one of the parties violated. If they do, then the contract can be broken. Now, here's the thing. Covenants are different from contracts. Everybody say covenants are different than contracts. See, covenants from a biblical sense is a binding promise, listen, that's between God and man or between humans under the witness of God. I'm going to say that again. Covenants from a biblical sense is a binding promise, listen, between God and man or between 2 humans that's being witnessed by God. Now, that's where marriage comes in at. Because God views marriage as a covenant. Say covenant. He views marriage as a covenant. And not only is marriage something that God established, but he also is something that he witnesses. And so what we're going to do is read about God's perspective regarding marriage. So what I like to do is always go back to the beginning of things so we can see the foundation of how God views something. So marriage is mentioned by Jesus in Matthew chapter 19. And I'm reading out of the King James Version this morning. Verse 3, it says, the Pharisees also came to him. And they came to him, tempting him. And they said to Jesus, is it lawful, or let's use the word legal, is it legal for a man to put away his wife for any cause? She burnt my toast, I want a divorce. That's what they were asking him, for every cause. So look in verse 4. And so Jesus answered and said to them, have you not read that he who is God, which made them at the beginning, at what, church? At the beginning, how did he make them? Male and female. So that cancels out same-sex marriage from God's perspective. You can say you got married, but you didn't get married under God. You got married under the world system. And verse 5 says, for this cause shall a man leave his father and leave his mother and shall cleave to who? Cleave to his wife. And they two shall be one flesh. Now watch verse 6, because this is where this covenant piece comes in at. It says, what therefore God has joined how? Joined together. He says, let no man put asunder. Notice that God views marriage as something that he put together. Now, there are two types of covenants in the Bible that are primary, meaning there may be other ones, but I'm just talking about two major primary covenants in the Bible. I'm going to call the first one regular covenants. Everybody say regular covenants. Now, regular covenants in the Bible were serious, but they did not include the shedding of blood. One example of that would be the covenant that God made for the rainbow. We're going to look in Genesis chapter 9, verse 12 real quick, and I want to show you this because these two types of covenant can show up in a marriage. Now, in this case, we're talking about a covenant that did not involve or include the shedding of blood. So it says now in Genesis chapter 9, verse 12, and God said, this is the covenant, or this is the token, and that word token can be viewed as the word sign. This is the token or sign of the what, church? Of the covenant which I will make. Listen to what he says now. This covenant that he said he will make between him, you, and he was talking to Noah, every living creature that is with you, and then for perpetual generations. So this covenant didn't just include Noah or the people that were with Noah. It also includes every living creature and then any perpetual generation after that, which includes us. So he says in verse 13, here's what I'm going to do about this covenant. I do set my bow. Now he's talking about a rainbow, so that's the word I'm going to use. He says, I do set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for a sign or a token of a covenant, say covenant, of a covenant between me and the earth. Notice now, it does not involve blood. Watch verse 14. And it shall come to pass when I bring a cloud over the earth that the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud. And then what's going to happen, he says, I will remember my what, church? He says, I will remember my covenant when I see that rainbow. And this covenant is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. And then he says, this covenant includes the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all the flesh. Now, let me just say this. If you're riding in the car with your kids and they point out a rainbow, hey, Mom, there's a rainbow. Hey, Dad, there's a rainbow. Take that opportunity to educate them on why the rainbow even exists. They need to know, hey, the reason you see that rainbow is that God made a covenant with us and the earth that he would never destroy the earth with water no more. So use that time to educate them. Now, everybody say regular covenants. Regular covenants did not include the shedding of what? Blood. Okay, so now we're going to talk about blood covenants. And blood covenants in the Bible were taken very seriously. Why? Because someone or something had to die. And that's why the shedding of Jesus' blood is so powerful. Because when Jesus shed his blood as a covenant, watch this, it established an eternal covenant between God and the salvation of man.